Okay, rotating, scaling, and moving is all well and good, but can you actually do something with it? Can you do something cool just in object mode? Oh yes, you definitely can. For example, we can make a very simple animation of a clock. To do this, we press Shift A. We select a cylinder, open the menu at the bottom left, make the values a little higher, press SZ and go 0.02. Then we press Shift A again, we choose a cube, same game here, make it a little bit narrower, maybe even a little bit narrower. Then we press GZ to lift it off the cylinder a little bit, SX and then SY. And now we're taking a quick look at our pointer, still a bit too fat. Here too, we can look from the side for a moment, and we move it down. We can do that in a very controlled way, which is why the side view is very important. Now, go into the edit mode with Tab. Press G and Y, move it so that the pivot point is almost at the edge, but not quite at the edge. And if you press R and Z now, it looks like you have something of a clock hand. To duplicate an object, meaning an exact copy of what you just had, you can press Command C and Command V and it will duplicate your object. If you want it a little faster, you can also press Shift D on the keyboard and then left click. Now with GZ, you can push that second pointer out a little upwards. We want to make it a bit thinner now. That means we press SX and then also a bit longer, so we press SY. Okay, we might want this pointer to be at 12 o'clock, which means we should have to press RZ and 90 for this. We already have two pointers at 90 degrees. That's pretty cool. We set the pivot point so that when we rotate our pointer, it actually rotates like a clock hand. Now, if I would say that I would set my origin of center of mass to volume, it doesn't help me that I've shifted my point of origin all the way over there. However, we don't just want to play around with it in the program here, we want to see the clock move and have an actual animation of it. To do this, we open the graph editor. That's what's really important for animation in general. And we are going to implement some keyframes. You might remember keyframes from 2D animation. We want to set both hands of the clock to 12 o'clock this moment, so we're going to press RZ90, setting both clock hands to 90 degrees. We're going to select the outside clock arm and press I, which means the I for Insert Keyframe. And then we pick Rotation from the list and go to frame 60, because that is exactly what we want to do, 1 minute, 60 seconds. So we press RZ minus 360. Also in Graph Editor, you want to click the Normalize button, because then you have a nice overview of everything, which helps a lot. It is important to see here that we have only rotated on the Z-axis, but like here, when we open this object transformation with this little drop-down menu, pointers also have the X and Y rotation here. We can now simply delete them with X. Now they only have the Z rotation. This makes it easier for us now because we can just press A and select everything and be sure we're only changing the Z rotation. If we were to change the X or the Y rotation now, it wouldn't necessarily look like a clock anymore. Let's put it this way, that means we already look okay in general, but our keyframes have such a stupid curve in between. This is a problem that arises from the so-called interpolation method. The standard interpolation mode, the Bezier interpolation mode, allows you to change the type of curves and the course of the curves with S and R. For example, if I do this one now, then we have this kind of animation. But we don't want that at all, we just want a perfectly straight line between these 2 points. For this we go to the option Key, we choose interpolation mode and choose linear. The T button also opens this menu for the interpolation mode, and we pretty much all have different interpolation modes, and linear is the one we want in this case. Important for this now, even if we wanted to zoom in, etc. Also, it's important to set the first keyframe to 0 again, because the time is 0 frames. That means that at the 0 frame, 0 seconds have elapsed, and 1 second will elapse per frame up until 60, as is logical. 60 frames, 60 seconds. It just makes thinking a lot easier in this case. Now, if you want to do a looping animation, you want to have this movement over and over again, which we can do. Let's press A and then Shift D and then X to do that on the X-axis. Example, from left to right to move and copy. This part from here to here is clear. But the part we see right here, that's the hard part. See that little bit there? That is actually always a huge problem in animation. Fortunately, we can solve it pretty easily. We can solve it here by going to frame 59, there we go, and now I press I, rotation, and we remove the X and the Y axis as we did before, and we go back to frame 60, we're back where we want to be, which means I'll do Shift X again, move it so that at frame 60 we were right back at 0 where we want to be. And now we have an accurate animation for a full hour on a clock It's very important to understand this concept. In order to make something clean, it is very important that you make sure that the first frame of your animation and the last frame of your animation are not the same. Then you have this little stick in there. Now, to check if that is the case, you can flip from keyframe to keyframe, so to speak. And you can do that with the arrow keys being up and down. If you use left and right, you skip through each individual keyframe. That means we can take a look and we'll see that this is the ideal case. That means we're just before the start of the next loop, exactly where we want to be. And then where the next loop starts is where that loop would end. That means we don't have duplicate keyframes, and that's the goal. We can now duplicate all this again with no problems. Okay, so we can just enter a numerical value here, which will be 120, then we do Shift D, then we go for 240, we press Shift D again to 240, Shift D goes to 480, and now we have our pointer, the one that matches nicely where one frame corresponds to 1 second. That also means that we should set our frame rate correctly in our output properties. The current frame rate is 24 FPS. Now we want to change this frame rate to 1 frame per second, and then you'll see we already have an absolutely basic animation with the second hand. That's quite good actually, not bad. Now all we have to do is adjust the hour hand and minute hand, and that is actually pretty easy as well. Now we also go to the first keyframe, we press I, we go to rotation, and now we don't want to end up at frame 60 again at 360 degrees like with the second hand, but at frame 3600, because 60 times 60 is 3600. If you don't want to do the whole mate thing, that's completely okay too. We can put in 60 here at the frame end. We have 60 seconds per minute and we have 60 minutes, which means that we can actually simply enter 60 times 60 as a mathematical expression here, and the result is 3600. Pretty cool, huh? That is, here we go now to 3600. R, Z, minus 360, I, rotation. And again, very important here, we go into the graph editor and delete the X and Y rotation axes. And then we press T, interpolation mode linear, and you see we have an hour hand that does its thing in a pretty natural way. Now of course we can add a pointer to it, etc. and so on, but not everything is relatively self-explanatory. In any case, we've already done a basic clock animation here. What we could also do, for example, is put our Suzanne on a cylinder on a kind of turntable. That means I'll just press Shift A, monkey here, and just bring it up into the scene. Now, let's look at it from the left side. So speak from here, twist the monkey a little bit now, S, Shift, Z, make it a bit larger, and then we have a relatively big turntable compared to our cool monkey. But now we want the monkey to always rotate in the same way like the cylinder, and there's a function for this called parenting.